So this
You're advertising?
this is our sponsor. It's actually a Palestinian woman that started this business, and I know that she would love for her product to be here when talking to you. I already know she's a big fan without even asking her. So I was like, I got to do it for her. So shout out to them, Cure.
Actually, turmeric. It's a turmeric supplement?
Yes, it's a supplement company. It's also black seed oil. I got 2 of them right here. Have you ever tried one? Do you want to try one?
I don't know what black seed is.
You don't know what black seed is? Okay, so this is actually one of the most probably beneficial things for your immune system. It's a natural vitamin. Would you mind trying one with me?
Yeah, tell me.
Here, I'll take one with you. Medea Benjamin, I think you're the founder of CodePink, correct?
Co-founder,
yes.
And which is important because we really believe in doing things together.
Yes. Thank you so much for joining the Ansari Podcast. It's an honor to have you on.
An honor to be on with you. I'm very excited.
I'm wondering, what is it that you're wearing right now?
Well, I'm wearing a shirt that I wear in Congress a lot because we're not allowed to carry signs in Congress. So we always find a way to get around their restrictions, and one is to iron on our sign. And this is a sign that says, "Stop killing the children of Gaza." And we have, unfortunately, a lot of children to choose from to put on our shirts. And many of us go in with different children. And we carry that with us for 2 reasons. One is because we want people to see what we're there for. And the other is we want to center ourselves in the children, because we get accused in Congress and all over the place of being Hamas lovers and, all kinds of ridiculous things. And we want it to be clear both on the outside and the inside of ourselves that we're doing this because we love people. We love children, we love women, we love men, we love families, and we're heartbroken to see all of the suffering. So the shirt is just a reminder of why we're in the halls of Congress every single day.
And is there a particular reason you have Rimas on? Does she have a story that you're willing to share, or it's almost random?
It's almost random, except I do have grandchildren, so I picked someone who is the age of one of my grandchildren. And I have other shirts with other children on them. And the story, individual story, I don't even know about this young woman. This girl, I just know she's not with us anymore. And so many children's lives have been ripped from them and from their parents and from their siblings. And I'm just amazed that everybody in this country, in this world, doesn't wake up every morning thinking, what can I do to save the children?
I'm wondering, how could someone, because you're Jewish background, how could someone call someone that is Jewish a Hamas lover?
Well, first they say you're a self-hating Jew, a Hamas lover.
How do you respond to that? How do you respond to that within yourself and to them?
I say, no, I'm not a Hamas lover. I'm not a lover of any military group. I'm a peace activist. I've been a peace activist my whole life. When I was growing up, it was the time in the 60s of the Vietnam War, and I was in high school during the Vietnam War. And I realized from that moment on that war is terrible. We shouldn't be killing each other, and that my government shouldn't be lying to us to tell us we had to go thousands of miles away to kill people that we didn't know anything about or have any beef with them. And, I learned about all the Vietnamese who were killed and the Vietnamese who were poisoned by the Agent Orange that we used, the poisons, and the Vietnamese who were maimed by our bombs, and to this day, the American soldiers who have lived with PTSD since the time they were sent over to Vietnam and then sent over to Afghanistan and then sent over to Iraq, and it goes on and on. And on my way here in Washington, D.C., on a freezing cold day, there was an encampment of people who were in tents in the freezing cold. I can bet you that those are U.S. veterans, because so many of them have struggled with what they were forced to do and have mental problems, have alcohol problems, have drug problems. It is not natural to be killing each other. And so as a Jew, I think it's our responsibility of Jews more than other people to be speaking out and saying, we can't let this happen. And I get so disgusted when I see my religion being used as a justification for the slaughter of other people. You know, my family, like many Jewish families, they were from Eastern Europe. They were wiped out during the Holocaust. I went with my mother once to see her homeland, which was Hungary and Romania, and there was nobody left. I mean, we couldn't find any trace of any family members because they were all killed. And so there should be the sensitivity among Jews to say we can't let that happen. And yet there's so many Jews who justify what's going on, support what's going on, whether it's in Israel, actual people going to kill people in Gaza and the West Bank, or people in this country who want the U.S. to continue to fund this, who support lobby groups like AIPAC. And I just find it very, very hard to understand how they can be so heartless.
So why do you think that is? Why are Jews supporting this? What's the cognitive dissonance happening between that, what's happening now and the Holocaust?
You know, it's interesting. Today, before coming here, I stopped at the American History Museum because somebody had told me that there's a little exhibit called The History of Giving, like the charity history of giving, and that one in the exhibit was one little box that was what people had in their homes in the early 1900s for the Jewish National Fund. And my grandmother had one of those boxes. And we used to make a big deal all the time about giving to the Jewish National Fund. And it was to plant a tree in Israel. And this we would do on holidays, we would do for graduations, we would do for birthdays, for bar mitzvahs, you know, certain important events in our family life. And I always thought of it as such a great thing that we're helping people to plant trees, to live in Israel. It took me a long time to realize what a myth that whole thing was. That one, even the planting of trees, it was destroying the local people's olive groves to put pine trees that are not even indigenous. But more important, it was to erase the Arab villages that were destroyed during the Nakba, which is a word I'd never heard of while I was growing up. And to buy large tracts of land to get people from Europe and from the U.S. to emigrate to Israel. Well, a lot of Jewish people still believe in that myth, still think that it is so important for the Jews to have a homeland, that we have been thrown out of the places that we have lived traditionally, and the Holocaust is something that's in the memory, especially of the older generation of Jewish people. Now, I'm in my 70s, so I'm part of the older generation, but the younger generation doesn't have that kind of attachment to Israel. You know, when I put a quarter into that little box, that was not so much to plant a tree in Israel. It was to plant a seed inside me, that I would be loving Israel and I would be loving the Zionist project. And so that's something that people grew up with, and it's hard to change that. And that's why my hope is with the younger generation who didn't grow up with that kind of heavy, heavy propaganda about what Israel is or isn't, and are more able to see the reality of the situation.
You know, the author I never get his name.
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Ta-Nehisi Coates. One of the interesting observations that he made when he went to Palestine, Israel, is that he felt that Israelis and Jews are suffering from a similar thing as African Americans, which is this embarrassment over what had happened to them. and an overcompensation of that embarrassment by showing strength, by showing actually we're the ones on top, to remove that subconscious feeling of inferiority in the wave of history. Do you think that's something you've noticed as well?
Well, in a sense, yes, but look at the situation of Jews in Israel compared to the black community in the United States. I mean, they certainly, while they did have a president, and there are members of the black community who have reached all of the pinnacles in the system, the majority of them haven't. And yet Israel is being controlled by the Jews, and I think there is certainly a fear. I mean, let's not downplay what happened in the Holocaust, and let's not downplay the sense that Jews have of we cannot let anything like that happen to us again. But it is, Ta-Nehisi Coates also said that he recognized immediately what he was seeing because he saw Jews-only roads, Jews-only settlements, Jews-only places to live. And he said it was very clear to me what that was. That was Jim Crow. That was apartheid. And so to create this system that is so oppressive, and to think that it's okay to live in that system. And I know, I've been to Israel many times. I was sent when I was 15 years old by my parents to go live in a kibbutz. And I went back many times. You live in a place like Tel Aviv, you can live without any idea of what is happening in the West Bank, about what is happening in Gaza. You can live a pretty cool life. And that's why, of course, October 7th was such a shock to so many people, because they don't understand, where it came from. They didn't pay attention to the oppression that people were living under, the Palestinians were living under on a regular basis. So I think on a certain level, that's why people in the black community in the United States really can relate very well to the Palestinian cause and see it as very much related to their own situation.
Hey, salam everyone. I'm excited to tell you guys about this amazing new group called Muslim Professionals, founded by a successful Muslim businessman. This is a free community connecting over 4,000 Muslims across the United States, working in places like Google, Microsoft, and Spotify. They're looking to connect people online and offline to work together, whether that's help finding a new gig, exchanging business ideas, forming partnerships, investing, or just making new friends. It's completely free to join. Just apply at muslimprofessionals.us. Let's grow together, win together. There's a quote by the Prophet, peace be upon him, where he says, "Help your brother, be he oppressed or oppressor." And the apostles, his friends, immediately understood how to help a brother if he's oppressed. Well, they were shocked by the oppressor comment, and they said, how do we help our brother if he's the oppressor? And he said, by stopping them from oppressing. And I think that's exactly what you're doing. You care about the Jewish community. You care about Israel. You care about Jews. And the best way to care for them is by stopping them from oppressing others. Is that why you do what you do?
Well, I do what I do because I care about humanity. And on one level, I feel this responsibility as a Jew, but I also feel a huge responsibility as a U.S. citizen, because I know Israel could not be doing that, what it's doing, without the U.S. support. So every day I wake up looking at the horrible news about what's going on in Gaza, and then I think about my tax dollars paying for this. And so that is another level of responsibility. And then I'm a mother, and I'm a grandmother, and I'm a human being. So on all of these levels, it's like, you've got to do something to try to stop this. So the Jewish identity is just one of them. And I can't say, which one is more important. In fact, if I had to say what's the most important, maybe I would say U.S. citizen, because I have seen how my government oppresses people all over the world since the time I was a teenager in Vietnam, or looking at what was happening in Vietnam. And I've had the opportunity, I used to work for the United Nations, so I traveled around the world quite a lot. And I've seen the tentacles of the U.S. in so many places, and especially the most oppressive places. And so it makes me feel this responsibility that I have felt for decades to change my government's policies.
One of the things that I think fascinates the Muslim world about you is that you're not Palestinian, you're not Arab, you're not Muslim, and yet you probably have more motivation and zeal towards this cause than most. What makes you wake up every morning and do this? I mean, some of these videos, you're not being treated very well. You always are respectful and you keep your temperament at a peaceful level. You don't raise your voice. And congressmen like Brian Mast, for example, say very nasty things to you. Why do you do this and how do you do this?
Well, I love the Muslim people. I've had an opportunity to not just meet, but spend time with so many people in the Muslim community. I find them the most generous, warm, welcoming, lovely people. I mean, I had a very interesting interaction when I was 15 living on a kibbutz, and I was told by the people on the kibbutz, oh, don't go out into those villages because, those are Arabs. And I was always a rebel, and I went out into one of the villages, and I found this beautiful, warm welcoming and giving me all this delicious food. And, and they loved the fact that I was Jewish and wanted to learn about them. And I found that all over the world, wherever I go. I used to, one of my amazing experiences was in Iraq under Saddam Hussein when the U.S. was threatening to invade Iraq. And we got a group of women together and decided we're going to go to Iraq and we're going to meet the people there. We're going to meet the weapons inspectors. We're going to see what's really happening on the ground. And I went to Iraq and we were on the border where the customs is. And I was really afraid because the border guard looked at my passport and he said, Benjamin, you're Jewish, aren't you? And I thought, uh-oh, all the other people in my group were allowed to enter and I was kept behind. And I thought, I'm going to be in some dungeon of Saddam Hussein's dungeon and nobody's going to hear from me again. And the border guard left. And he came back about 20 minutes later and he was like huffing and puffing. And he said, I ran home to get my notebook because I'm studying Hebrew and I wanted you to correct my grammar. And I was like in shock and said, why would you do that? And he said, when we went to war with Iran, I learned Farsi, I learned Persian, and now I'm learning Hebrew because I think it's important to be able to communicate with the people who we are told are our enemies. And that was such a lesson to me, to reach out and learn about the people we're told are our enemies. And so I've always wanted to know more about the Muslim world. My parents didn't know a Muslim. My parents had never met a Muslim or a Palestinian. And I always wanted to reach out to people who I was told were my enemies. So I think that's why I got to know and learn about the Arab culture. Now, it's not, to me, just Muslims or Arabs. It's the world community. I mean, I love Latin America. I love Asia. I love Africa. I love meeting people from different cultures. And I think we are one beautiful humanity if we would only stop killing each other. And so given that the U.S. government is the number one militarist government in the world and that we spend the majority of our discretionary funds on the Pentagon while people don't have housing, while people don't have, can't afford their groceries, while young people have debts that they can't even pay off. I mean, this is criminal. And so I think changing this war economy that we live in and allowing people to stop thinking of immigrants as rapists, as Trump has said, or as destroying our country when we're all building together, we shouldn't think of any other people as our enemies. We should think of one humanity, one world, one love, and how are we going to change the culture of violence into a culture of peace?
I think one of the tragedies of the narrative that Zionism has pushed is this apparent historical hatred between Muslims and Jews that doesn't exist. It actually doesn't exist at all. They flip the knowledge on its head. there has been more, and again, this isn't an attack on Christians or Christianity, but if you just look historically, Christians have done more to Jewish life when it comes detrimentally than Muslims ever have. In fact, when the Spaniards were kicking out the Muslims and the Jews from Spain, that's the Spanish Inquisition. They were torturing Muslims and Jews together until they confessed that Jesus is Lord. And that's actually a thing. So one of the things that the Ottoman Empire did was send a ship, multiple ships, just to grab the Jewish people alongside the Muslims. The Muslims have when Omar, I don't know if you know this, but the left-hand man, let's say, because the right-hand man was Abu Bakr, the third person or the second best friend of the Prophet, peace be upon him, was Omar. And when Omar conquered Jerusalem peacefully, he was the most powerful man at this point. The Christians gave him the keys without even war. And as soon as he enters, he goes, where are the Jewish people? And so, we've kicked them out. We don't allow them in Jerusalem. And so he said, bring me 4 or 5 Jewish families. And they subsidized for the Jewish families to live and be able to start their lives in Jerusalem again. Muslims actually basically replanted Jews back in Jerusalem when they conquered it. And I think even when the Zionists told the Moroccan king, hand over the Jews that you have, right, when the creation of Israel, he said, I think he almost said, like, over my dead body that we'll give you our Jews, right? And I think there's so much between us that is more love between the Jewish and Muslim community historically than there ever has been hatred.
But now you see that changing because of all of this months of genocide and people in both communities. I think there's more anti-Semitism, there's more anti-Muslim hatred. All of this is building up because of the genocide. And I fear that this is going to be with us for a long time to come. Because how can you watch what's happening every day and knowing that this is something that is being pushed by Israel, and that in this country and in many of the European countries, it's being portrayed as this is for the Jewish people. And when they have bills like the ones before Congress that are redefining what anti-Semitism means and saying that if you criticize the government of Israel, that is anti-Semitism, which it isn't, that is something that is going to have long-term implications for us. And we already see people in the U.S. who are losing their jobs, being expelled from school, facing doxing and all kinds of retaliation because they criticize the government of Israel. And so I do worry that this is creating more hate between peoples who, as you have correctly said, historically have lived together side by side and appreciated each other's religion, culture, etc.
And I think people like you are one of those that are really helping eradicate the natural rise of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia within both communities. Because anytime in closed doors, someone is starting to get, like, I'll tell you, behind closed doors, when Muslims are talking, one of us will start saying something anti-Semitic. And then we'll go, but Code Pink, but, what's that?
Jewish Voice for Peace, or the young people, if not now, right?
Norman Finkelstein. It's actually been Jews that have been some of the biggest powerhouses for the Palestinian cause. And that has really helped ease the tensions and the fires and the flames of anti-Semitism that you are correctly stating have been rising in the Muslim world. And it isn't for no reason, but, hatred should not bring more hatred.
Right. And I wish that people who are not speaking out at least don't equate what Israel is doing with Jews, because that's just not the case. There are so many of us that are absolutely opposed to what the Israeli government is doing.
It's like any group of people that are claiming Islam and using that as a tool for committing violent acts. It's the same thing.
Right. And when I see I mean, I was just at this gathering today of Muslims and Jews, and when I heard some of the members of the Jewish community speaking in favor of what Israel is doing, I was so appalled, because you're more appalled at your own community when they are taking a position that is so anti-human.
So what was this gathering?
It was called the Peace Cafe, and it brings Muslims and Jews together.
Oh, okay. This is specifically for Muslims and Jews.
Well, it's open for anybody.
So what do you think is the solution? How do we end what's happening in the Israeli-Palestinian genocide?
I wish I had an answer for that. I mean, I do think it has to be one secular democratic state where people are living side by side, because I don't think there is a possibility of a two-state solution anymore. And I think it's just garbage when people are saying, I support a two-state solution. It doesn't mean anything, because the Israelis have taken over so much of the West Bank, and now with Trump in office, they might even annex the entire West Bank, and they are destroying Gaza. So what is there for a Palestinian state? How we get to that point is going to be very hard to see. But I think that as a U.S. citizen, my job is to stop my government from supporting Israel's policies. And that means stop the weapons. And not just now, for the future. We should not be allowing our government to be sending weapons to a country that is committing genocide. And even before October 7th, it was a country that was violating international law on a regular basis. It's also a country that is a middle top income country, where people have, in the Israelis there, have better social services than we have in this country. So I think we have to have a campaign in this country to stop sending our tax dollars to Israel. That's and related to that is to cut the wings of the lobby group AIPAC, which is so strong and has its tentacles in every important aspect of our government. The White House, Congress, I am in those halls of Congress almost every single day. And you could just feel the presence of AIPAC everywhere you go. I mean, you walk the halls and you see the signs everywhere. I stand with Israel. I stand with Israel. I stand with Israel. You see Israeli flags next to the U.S. flag. I mean, it is insane. Why would you have a flag of a foreign government in your U.S. office? It doesn't make any sense, except for AIPAC. And the fact that AIPAC was able to take out two of our best Congress people, Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. The fact that AIPAC has instilled the fear of being a target into every single one of those Congress people. It means that our entire policy is distorted, because were it not for AIPAC and the Christian Zionists, we shouldn't minimize the power of Christian Zionism. They are huge, they are powerful, and they are inside the U.S. military, they're inside the White House, they're inside of Congress. And what I mean by that is it's not just the power of those lobby groups like the group CUFI, Christians United for Israel, which is massive. It claims 10 million members. But also many of the members of Congress themselves are Christian Zionists. And they have this belief that we have to support Israel no matter what, because that is how we're going to get the second coming of Christ, and that is when the Armageddon's going to happen. And if you don't convert to Christianity, all of our Jewish friends will then be burned to hell. And those people who think like that are in our Congress. And they are voting every single day, and they're making laws for us. And so the power of the pro-lobby groups like AIPAC, the power of the Christian Zionists, the power of the weapons industry, because let's not forget there's a lot of money to be made from war. And the weapons industry is so intertwined with the Israeli weapons industry and the high tech, the AI. I mean, that is very, very much part of the U.S. industry now, making billions and billions of dollars. So we have these three very powerful lobby groups that we have to fight against. And this is what I try to do. And the reason I go to Congress every day is because they have to see us and feel us. And any of your listeners, I want them to know that unlike any other country that I know in this world, we are able to walk into our congressional buildings, and we are able to walk into the offices of our Congress people. You don't have to show an ID. You have to go through a metal detector, but you don't have to be anybody. You don't even have to be from their district. You can go in their offices, and that is an access that we have to take more advantage of. And that's why I go every day and I invite people, and usually we have about 20 people, different people every day who come and join us and go and walk from door to door into those offices, because they need to see us. They need to feel our presence. They need to know that there is a strong opposition, and we need to build up an alternative to those three big, powerful lobby groups that are so distorting our policies.
Wow, I did not know this. I knew of a story where a Palestinian woman sat down with a congressman and she told him about her story coming to the United States and her experience in Palestine. And he told her how much she's moved him. And since then, his policies have completely changed. I don't remember who this congressman was. I think it was also the same congressman that Qatar, I shouldn't have said the name, but a certain Arab nation sent him $10 million and he completely disregarded them. He betrayed them. He took the money and ran, basically. And I said that on a previous podcast. And that as you're saying, that's the power of the U.S. citizen. You don't need $10 million. If you're a U.S. citizen, your Congress people are willing to listen to you over even a country willing to give them $10 million.
Well, let me modify that a bit, because we have access, but we don't have power. And if you're AIPAC, you're not just randomly going into an office and saying, can I pretty please speak to somebody who runs foreign policy here? You have a meeting with the congressperson themselves, and they have the real power. But we do have access, and we have to make better use of that access. And so what we've been doing at CodePink is asking people to come and join us. You have one day off, you can call in a sick day or whatever, or come from outside Washington, come for a week. If you need a place to stay, let us know. There are many people who are opening up their homes for people who come to lobby. And they come and join us, and we are always a diverse group, diverse in terms of ethnicity, age. We have Jews, Muslim, Christians, atheists. And it's so loving, the group that comes together all the time. And we sometimes have meetings, and sometimes we're just randomly deciding, okay, we're going to go visit these offices today. And we go in and we talk to people. And then sometimes, not a lot of people like to do this. I do, but most people don't like to, which is to try to catch the Congress people when they're walking in the halls or they're walking outside, and ask them, are you still in favor of sending weapons to Israel? Do you think that there's a genocide going on? Pose questions to them and be videotaping them, because that has been very powerful in this last year, to get some of them on camera and then post it on our social media for people to see how some of these Congress people are really heartless. And some of these Congress people will say things like, they'll basically say there are no innocent Palestinians. Somebody like Brian Mast, who is now going to head the Foreign Affairs Committee on the House, who lost his legs in a war we should have never been in Afghanistan, says that it's the fault of, everything's the whole fault of Hamas, but it's also the fault of Palestinians because they voted for Hamas. And we say, the babies who are being killed, they didn't vote for anybody. And he said, well, it's then the fault of their parents. So you get these kind of heartless people who have positions of power, and we are able to confront them and show people exactly what they're saying. But this is all to say that more people should come with us. We should really be flooding those halls of Congress on a daily basis. If we are incensed about them giving away billions and billions of dollars of our money to go to Israel, if we're incensed about the people in the UN, the U.S. representatives vetoing resolutions calling for a ceasefire, if we're incensed about the way that our government is providing intelligence to the Israelis for what they're doing, then we can't be flooding the White House because we can't get in the White House. We can't flood the State Department because we can't get in. But we can actually get into Congress. And that's why I think it's so important that more people come.
What I find so troubling by what you're saying is, if it wasn't for you, a Jewish woman, I'm not even sure if this would be happening. It almost takes a Jewish person to be able to go up against a Jewish PAC, right? And I think that's the issue right there. What can we, because the majority people that support Palestine, sadly, are Muslims or are Arab. What are we doing wrong? And what are the Jewish people doing right in that they're able to galvanize, they're able to stand for what they believe and go out every day and do it? Because me and Osama were talking about this the other day, where Jewish people will take up offices that are so mundane in government. You wouldn't even think or hear about these offices. And then it turns out to be one of the most influential offices in the local government. I mean, what's the mentality behind this? What can we learn?
Well, if we look at AIPAC, for example, not only is it a group that has a lot of money, but I think sometimes we minimize the fact that they have people power as well. There was this great interview that this libertarian Republican, one of the only ones in the Congress, Tom Massey, had with Tucker Carlson. And it was just a fascinating interview. If any of your people are listening, they should look it up because it is eye-opening. And one of the things that Tom Massey said is that every representative, he was talking about Republicans, he said, I don't know how it works in the Democrats, everyone has an AIPAC person that is assigned to them in their district. He called them the babysitters. And that you have to check with your AIPAC babysitters how to vote on all of these bills that come up. Well, yes, you could say that's because they give money to these Congress people, but it's also because they have a relationship with them. They know them. They know their staff people. They go to visit their offices on a regular basis in the district. And that is powerful. And we don't do that. Not just the Muslims, but also just those of us in general who don't like what AIPAC stands for. We don't have that kind of organization. We don't have that kind of stamina. And you must hold your nose and do this kind of stuff because, these are not our friends, but we have to make them our friends. And in some ways, I'm not a good example of that because I'm not always the nicest person to these people. But we have to do that. Yes, we should run for office, all kinds of offices. We should get into those offices. But we also have to know the people who are supposed to be representing them and really push them on a regular basis. So, I know there's a lot of cynicism, and rightly so, towards the people who are supposed to represent us, whether it's people on the state level or people on the national level like our Congress people. And especially when I talk to young people, they're fed up with this whole system, and they should be. It's a terrible system. We shouldn't just have a two-party system that gives us such a worthless alternatives. We should have some real alternatives. We should have a multi-party system. But as we're trying to build some alternatives, we have to work with what we have right now. And so I would say to people in the Muslim community that we have to know who your congressperson is. You should know who that person is. You should know who their staff people are, their local staff people and their national staff people who deal with foreign policy. You should call them on a regular basis. You should be a pain in the butt to them. You should say, now, I heard that the director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital has been disappeared by the Israelis and we don't know what's happening to him. Can you do something? Can you put out a statement? Can you put out a tweet asking for the Israeli government to release these medical workers? I mean, there's things happening on a regular basis. So call those offices and ask them to do something. This is pretty elementary stuff that can take 5 minutes out of your day. And I think everybody should be doing that.
How do you get a congressman's number or their office number?
You call the switchboard, which is 202-224-3121, and you ask for the office of whoever it is. And if you don't know who it is, just Google your zip code and they'll tell you who your congressperson is. And then, of course, if you don't live in Washington, D.C., but elsewhere, you will have 2 senators. And you should know who your 2 senators are. And you should be calling those offices as well. So that's 3 calls that you could be making at least 1 time every week.
We all know the health benefits of turmeric. Now you can get them in capsule form at Cure Your World, infused with black pepper and black seed powder. That makes it amazing for your joints and cartilage health, boosts your brain function and memory, promotes your heart health and cholesterol levels, and improves your digestion. You can check it out at cureyourworld.com or on Instagram at Cure Your World today and use the Ansari code Ansari15 for 15% off. You know, we talked about this on a podcast with Israt Shekhar. I don't know if you know her, Israt Speaks. But she talked about how in Amnesty International they have a power politics gameplay where they recognize who the target is, quote unquote, of a congressperson, and they see who influences them, and they find who talks in their ear, who tells who has their ear, right? And they find those people to be more important than the congressperson to get to find a way to reach. And we went in depth discussing power politics and power play. And this is what I think you guys do on a day-to-day basis. You talk to the representatives and the representatives of the representatives.
Well, I think that our work over the last more than a year has really been important in a couple of different ways. One is that we've made a lot of friends among representatives themselves. I mean, they actually give us their cell phones and we can call them and talk to them and ask them what kind of bills are coming up, what's happening. The other is we have nice coalitions that we are part of that have groups like Jewish Voice for Peace and American Muslims for Palestine and all kinds of other groups that have a regular way of communicating with each other and trying to build strategies together, learn from each other. And what I'm maybe most proud of is how we have infiltrated in a lot of offices, even in very unsympathetic offices, with the young staff people. It used to be, when we'd go into these offices and we'd ask to speak to the chief of staff or we'd ask to speak to the senior policy person, and sometimes we'd get to speak to them and sometimes it would only be an assistant or even the person at the front desk. And I would be very disappointed that we would only get to speak to the person at the front desk until I realized how important it is to influence those people at the front desk as well. Because it is the young people who are thinking differently. It is the young people who are more open to learning. It is the young people who are the future leaders of this country. And I can't tell you, there is not a day that I am in Congress that a young person doesn't come up to me, and sometimes it's whispering and say, I can't tell you what office I'm in, but we all love you. We love Code Pink, and we're so glad that you're here, and we're trying on the inside to change our boss's policies. But we just want you to know it's so important that you are seen and heard here. And And we love that, and we think that's important. And so that's why I go back to this issue of we have to be seen, we have to be heard. Our side has to be much more vocal, much more out there. And, you know, I am a person that loves demonstrations. I mean, you call a demonstration, I am there. You know, I just came from a demonstration right now. I love being out in the streets. I love being with people who are like-minded. I love seeing people who are carrying their homemade signs and bringing their children with them or their grandmothers with them. But sometimes a lot of energy is put into demonstrations. It's on a Saturday when everything is closed and you're not really having an influence there. I'm not saying don't go to demonstrations. I'm saying go to demonstrations, but I'm saying that in addition to that, we have to go to places that are open, where we actually interact with people, where we actually are confronting people who don't agree with us. And that's why I think going into these spaces like Congress is so important.
I think that's what it is right there, is the mundane tasks. One of the issues that I find in the Muslim community, my own community, is we have a main character syndrome complex, right? Where we want to go to the big protests, the $1 million march or the $1 million man march protests, but we don't want to do the work where you go in on a Monday morning to a congressperson in their office and try to talk to them, and then you end up just with the front desk person. That's mundane work, but that's the real work right there. How did you get yourself used to the mundane work? How did you get yourself motivated to do it on a day-to-day basis and then see its impact?
Well, I haven't done this on a day-to-day basis until after October 7th. You know, I retired. I thought I was going to spend my retirement, you know, enjoying myself, traveling around the world. My partner keeps saying, when are you going to really retire, you know? And instead of retiring, I'm more active than ever because I get up every morning, I turn on Al Jazeera, I hear what's happened the day before, and I'm like, oh man, am I angry. And then I get on my bicycle and I ride over to Congress. And I feel like the mundane work is not what I like, but it's what I have. You know, we have to look for the spaces that are open. And when you say you and your friends, you know, getting together to go to an office and speak to somebody at front desk, one is you're getting your friends together. So you have a nice group of friends. That's nice. And the other is they've got to get used to seeing you. And you know, I don't always go very nicely. I mean, I've done die-ins in their offices. I've done sit-ins in their offices. They call the police on us to drag us out of their offices. So it's not all about being nice. Sometimes it's about being really forceful. I mean, we go in their offices and we read out the names of the babies who've been killed in the last week. We go in the offices with these shirts on. We go in the offices, you know, to explain to them what has happened in the last week, whatever it is. But what I'm saying is the important thing, and I know I'm privileged now because I'm actually retired, so I can do this every single day. But I tell people, if you have a job, don't you get a week's vacation? Don't you have some sick days? Don't you have some time that you can come? Don't you have one day that you can call in and come and join us, or go to your local office? And it is mundane work, but you know what? It's not only one of the things that we can do and should do, it also lifts our spirits, because when you're not doing anything, you can get very depressed just by looking at your social media and seeing what's happening. I mean, I see children freezing to death and I freak out about that. You know, I have grandchildren. I think of my grandchildren freezing to death in Gaza. I mean, that is just something that should send shivers down the spine of any sentient human being. And so what are you going to do? Just feel awful and go about your own business? No, you got to do something. And so think of the things that you can do that, you know, make you feel at least I've done that. At least I've called the office of my congressperson. At least I've, bugged my senator. At least I've called over to the State Department. I mean, there's all kinds of numbers and people that you can call and try to visit. We don't have to feel depressed, despair, hopeless. We'll feel much better when we do things that are active.
One of the things that's striking and apparent when talking to you is the level of empathy you have. I think what maybe you've recognized I've been trying to get out of you is, why are you doing this? How are you doing this? Where are you getting the motivation? And what I'm starting to realize is it's the power of empathy, the power of the heart. When the heart is sound, it makes the whole body sound. How did you cultivate such empathy within yourself?
I think that all children are empathetic and have a sense of fairness, and that it gets drummed out of us as we get older. And it's more of the dog-eat-dog kind of world, and each one for themselves. And I think our religion teaches us empathy. I certainly was taught that I should do things for other people as part of my religion. So there is a religious element to that, although I consider myself more of a spiritual person than a religious person. How do you... I think we need to cultivate that sense of empathy. I sometimes tell people that they should read a paper, look at social media, do something, and think of what are they seeing that is wrong with what's happening in the world, and what might they do to address that. Not just feel, oh my God, can you believe this is happening? But is there something I can do about it? So it's two things. One is to cultivate that sense of empathy, and the other is to challenge yourself to think of what you can do. Now, when I was younger, what I decided I was going to do was to study public health and I studied nutrition, and I went out in the world trying to work with poor families in small villages in Africa whose children were dying of malnutrition. And I worked as a nutritionist. I worked for the World Health Organization, for the Food and Agriculture Organization. And so my response to my own question was, I'm going to work in the world to help feed hungry children. I realized as I went around the world doing that this was more politics, and it was about distribution, because there was plenty of food in the world, but people didn't have access because of the systems that we've set up with the ultra rich and the ultra poor. So the way that I have tried to live my life is to find ways that I can influence the political system. But what I'm trying to say is that it's not just empathy we need, it's empathy with action. And in terms of that empathy, I think every day how lucky I am that I can turn on a faucet and get clean water. And I think of the people around the world, whether it's people in Sudan or Somalia or Haiti or in Gaza, who can't turn on a faucet and get clean water. And that basic element, or whether you're going in a cold day like today and you're able to go inside and be in a place that's warm, think about people who don't have access to keeping themselves warm. The basic things that we take for granted, think about the people who don't have that. And that is cultivating a sense of empathy. Why were we born in this country instead of being born in a very poor village in Africa? Why were we born into a family that had a decent income and could send us to a good school instead of being born into a poor family that didn't have that? It's just, to recognize the privilege that we have and to use that privilege in a way to make other people's lives better.
SubhanAllah. It's incredible to hear you say this kind of stuff, because I think you just embodied what Islam is all about. And I'm not even sure that you know that. You know, like you said, you're a spiritual person. I know you represent Code Pink, so tell us a little bit about Code Pink and where we can donate to help.
Well, Code Pink started after the 9/11 attacks, which is so long ago that most young people were not even born at that time. And we have been working ever since trying to stop our government from responding to violence in an even more violent way. And so we have grown tremendously in this last year, and now we have chapters around the country. So you can go online at CodePink.org and see if there's a chapter in your community and join Code Pink chapter. And it's open to men, to women, to anybody who wants to join Code Pink. We would love to have you or form a chapter in your community. And of course, donate, and you can donate online.
And how do those donations help? What do they do?
Well, we are mostly a volunteer organization. We're an organization that functions with a budget that's under $1 million, that is run by local volunteers. And I love that about Code Pink, is that it's a mostly volunteer organization. But you do need staff. And you need staff who's going to help organize those volunteers and give support to those volunteers and do the social media on the website. And we have great social media. We have a huge following on social media. So the donations go to keep the backbone, the framework of Code Pink going, so that we can keep this kind of energy that we have among the grassroots.
Very nice, very nice. And you said CodePink.org.
CodePink.org, and social media, just look up Code Pink. We have a great presence on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok. Me personally, under Medea Benjamin, I try to post something every day. I did today a stop at the Museum of American History to do that post on the history of the Israel Defense Fund, Israel National Fund. And so, yes, we do something every day that's educational and that is action-oriented.
Very nice. Honestly, that's all the questions that I have for you, Medea. Do you have any questions for me? Any thoughts?
Well, one of the other things today is I talked to a young person who is feeling quite helpless about the Trump years coming in, feeling hopeless. And I wonder how you feel about a Trump administration.
Oh, I love that question. Osama, did you hear that question, bro? I think everything in life is neutral. It's how you react to it that makes it positive or negative. Last time Trump and his presidency, to me, was neutral, because how the Muslim community reacted was going to determine for me whether it was positive or negative. Trump's last presidency, I felt, was positive because how the Muslim community reacted, because of how the Muslims and non-Muslims galvanized together. When I saw Christians against the Muslim ban, Jews against the Muslim ban signs, I saw positivity. When I saw Muslims no longer being the enemy and becoming on the side of good and entering the Democratic Party and becoming, a voice for peace and diversity and love, I found that very positive. And so for me, Trump presidency or not Trump presidency, it's all neutral until I see the reaction of my people to that presidency. Obviously, we wanted a loss for the Democrats this year. Whether there was, honestly, I was saying this to Sam the other day, whether there was a puppy or a dog on the other side or Trump, it didn't matter. But coming to think about it, I would vote for a puppy or a dog anyways. We wanted Harris to lose because we couldn't allow the Democrats to win off the back of a genocide. We couldn't allow the Democrats to say, because the Democrats made a calculation in their mind. They said, we fear the possibility of losing because of the genocide, but we know we'll lose if we go against AIPAC. And so they made a bet. They made a bargain with themselves that it's more likely we'll win if we take the AIPAC side. What I loved was that the Latino vote and the Muslim vote said, you don't have our votes bought and sold. We don't just give you our votes because you say you like us, and then your policies kill us. So the Trump presidency had to happen, almost, right? Or the Republican presidency had to happen because of the position the Democrats took. Now, whether the Trump presidency is good or bad is up to the communities that are affected by it and how they react.
I love that answer because I think that, well, we're going to have some horrible things thrown at us. Let's remember, we had horrible things thrown at us during the last 4 years of Biden, and there are opportunities. The opportunities to organize, to mobilize. More Democrats are going to start saying, oh, gosh, there's a genocide going on. Maybe I should do something about it, because they're not going to be going against their own party. Now they're going to be going against a Republican. And I do think that there are ways that we can take some of the questioning that many people in the Republican Party, including in Congress, have about shouldn't we stop spending our money on wars overseas, and not just apply that to Ukraine, but to Israel as well. And I think it's also important that we remember when we're feeling down and we're feeling like the majority in our country is just out to lunch. The majority of people in this country, according to opinion polls, not only want a ceasefire, they want to stop giving money to Israel. They want to stop sending weapons to Israel. And when you put that, of course, on the global scale, it's the vast majority of people in this world that are looking aghast at what Israel is doing. And so I think having Trump gives us some new opportunities, and not only to push aside the labels and actually find people in strange places that agree with us, but also to get people who were unwilling to speak out against the Biden administration to now join with us. So there are new opportunities that we have to take advantage of. And the last thing I want to say is that when Trump was out campaigning and he would say, I want to end these wars, he would get a huge response because people want to end the wars. And then he gets into office and he's going to be torn by different sides. Those who want to end the wars and those who want to keep the wars going. And as we already talked about, the ones who want to keep the wars going include very powerful lobby groups. But the ones who want to end the wars have to be there tugging on the other side. And that's us. And if we're not vocal, we're not tugging on the other side. We've got to be seen, we've got to be heard, we've got to be a presence. And I think we do have an opportunity that we can't lose.
Absolutely. And I think I even heard, one of the funny things about what you're saying is they always say or Sami Hamdi even said the Democrats are with you when they're not in power and they're against you when they're in power. And the other thing is suddenly when the Democrats aren't in power, they'll be anti-genocide. We're going to see it, inshallah, I think. And one last thing on my end is Benjamin Netanyahu was in a political corner with Biden trying to push him and pressure him. It would have made him look weak if he would have done it. But President Biden coming in, campaigning on ending wars. President Trump coming in, campaigning on ending wars, will give Netanyahu a political exit. Because he's like, yes, I want to end wars too. I'm peaceful too. I'm not a tyrant. And I want peace in the Middle East. I'm a patriot. I love America. And I love President Trump. And that will make Trump's base very happy, and he'll have a political exit. I think if you're in
Inshallah.
Also, I think if you're into politics, you see how there's a political crema for Netanyahu there to be able to come out.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. And as you said, the sort of things are neutral, and it depends which way people act and how we influence the future. And there are so many good and bad possibilities ahead of us. but it really is, how are we going to influence the future? And we didn't have a lot of opportunities in the last 4 years to influence the future. Now at least things will be different, right? At least there'll be some more play happening that we can try to be players in that. And I think the Muslim community has a lot of possibilities to influence in the coming months and years.
Inshallah, inshallah. Medea Benjamin, any last thoughts before we head off?
That it's been lovely having this conversation with you, that I just hope that as we go forward, the voices of peace that the Muslim community really represents are ones that we can hear louder and louder, and people will be able to understand and appreciate the love that is the basis of the Muslim faith, and how we need to work together for a world free of violence, a world where we cooperate with each other, where we love each other, where we have compassion for each other and for the planet, and that we really shape a much better future than the one we have right now.
Amen to that. Medea Benjamin, co-founder of CodePink. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast. You are the first non-Muslim faith-based person that I've ever had
what an
on.
honor.
And I think life is poetic in that. And I think this is very poetic in that you are a Jewish woman as the first non-Muslim on the podcast, and that I'm an Arab, Egyptian Muslim who's supposedly supposed to be anti-Semitic. So thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Same here. Thank you.
And thank you guys for listening to the Ansari Podcast. Hey, salam guys. We're trying to build more studios, hire more people, and create more shows that you guys will love and enjoy. If you guys want to invest in us, then go on patreon.com/Ansari Podcast and support us today.